Welcome, team members, to our training on cold weather conditions, also known as cold stress. It's important you know how to protect yourself from cold weather hazards. And who knows about this subject all too well? This guy. I got frostbite on both my fingers and ears 20 plus years ago. And let me tell you, I still feel the negative effects of the nerve damage that was caused from this incident. Anytime it gets cold, the tips of my fingers and ears get really sensitive, many times to the point of being painful. It's important you understand why I make note of this. Safety is very much about life and death topics, but it's also about your overall quality of life. The truth is, the vast majority of injuries at work and at home are not deaths. They're incidents that can cause often debilitating issues and therefore impacting your overall quality of life. Our safety team is interested in each of you and your overall quality of life. We care about you as an individual and the many job tasks you are required to perform on a daily basis. The topic of cold stress is just as important to us as any other topic we could train you on. The fact of the matter is, there are some very real hazards associated with cold stress, just as it is with heat stress. So without further ado, here are the 3 most common issues associated with cold stress. They are hypothermia, frostbite, and trench foot. And I would even add a 4th in there called fatigue. So we'll call it 4 for the sake of this training. Let's take a moment to break down each of these 4 cold stress hazards, starting with hypothermia. The crazy thing about hypothermia is your body very slowly falls into this particular illness. Even at temperatures of 59 degrees and below, your body can start to develop this life-threatening illness. What's the body temp you need to monitor? Great question. Once your body temp drops to 95 degrees and below, you're at risk for hypothermia. You'll know you're getting there when you experience excessive shivering, muscle tension, and fatigue. Now, to me, those sound like every time I'm cold. So the easiest way to cut through the standard list of WebMD symptoms and know for sure what it is, you guessed it, just like heat stress, you can use a thermometer to check your body temp. All the more reason these should be provided to you in every first aid kit, especially those out in the field where these extreme temperatures can exist. So if you get done with this training and realize you don't have one in there, I highly recommend you add it to the toolbox. Now, that being said, some of the more advanced symptoms make it a little clearer. They could be slurred speech, loss of coordination, erratic behavior, slow breathing, and slow heart rate, as well as unconsciousness at its very worst. Now, before we move on any further, it's important to pause and think about how prepared you actually are and what environments you find yourself in that requires extra preparation. So the question is, are you prepared? Have you processed these exposures with your team and talked through the operation-specific solutions to keep you and your team safe? If not, I'm going to help you out. There are 4 basic factors that must be assessed before starting your shift each day. They are as follows: cold air temperatures, high velocity air movement, the dampness of the air, and knowing if you'll be in contact with or even around cold water or cold surfaces, which leads us right into proper preparation. There are several generic tips I could provide you, but the 3 most important things you need to do are: number 1, plan your work for each day. Number 2, wear the appropriate clothing. And finally, number 3, listen to your body. Let's quickly break down these before we get into the ways you can protect yourself against hypothermia, frostbite, and trench foot. First off, if you have a smartphone, you'll want to check the weather app to see the wind chill outlook both before your shift and during your shift. Remember, wind chill is the decrease in air temperature as felt by your body. It doesn't mean the air temp is that low. It's taking into account how your body feels when the cold wind is blowing against it. And really, if our body feels that cold, that's ultimately what matters because it's responding accordingly. Secondly, you want to wear the appropriate clothing. It's recommended that you wear at least 3 layers of clothing. The first layer should be a moisture-wicking wool or synthetic material that pulls moisture away from your skin. Cotton does the exact opposite, so don't wear cotton clothing, especially as the base layer. The second middle layer is recommended to be a thicker wool or synthetic material that will help insulate the skin even further, creating a barrier that will trap your body heat and keep it close to the skin. The third, and maybe not final layer, depending on the weather, should be an outer shell with the ability to keep moisture, snow, and rain off the inner layers and therefore your body. This shell should also be a synthetic material with a thick inner layer to trap body heat and keep you warm. Now, let's make an important addition to this discussion. The same layering technique should be used on your hands and feet. Wicking socks and wicking gloves with layered protection is critical in keeping your extremities free from moisture that could lead to frostbite or trench foot. The most likely scenario for active field crews is their very own sweat causing the moisture, not necessarily being doused in snow or rain. So be mindful of the type of activity you're doing and keep the sweating to a minimum if at all possible. This could mean shedding layers for a period if you've overdone it, or changing out moist socks with dry ones during a break. Coming back to the 4 major issues with cold stress. Hypothermia is something we already made mention of at the beginning of this video. What we didn't discuss is how we can get a core body temperature below 95 degrees back to the optimal 97 to 99 degrees your body was designed to stay at. Here are a few important things you can do to reverse the hypothermia process. Remove and replace all wet clothing with warm, dry clothing. Do your best to move yourself or a team member into a dry, sheltered area such as a warm car or building, free from wind and other elements. Provide the victim with warm, non-alcoholic, caffeine-free drinks to literally warm them from the inside out. Moving on to the issue of frostbite. This is where the soft tissue on an individual begins to deteriorate as a result of restricted blood flow and an actual freezing of the tissue cells. Fingers, toes, cheeks, noses, and ears are the most susceptible due to an already poor blood flow in these areas. If you start to feel tingling, stinging, or aching and numbness in any of these areas, you're likely right on the brink of frostbite. The best way to treat this is to dry the area and keep it covered while moving your facial muscles and flexing your fingers and toes often. This will encourage blood flow until you get the affected areas under warm water, approximately 102 to 110 degrees. But do not rub the affected areas because that can actually cause greater tissue damage. You also shouldn't use scalding hot water. Trench foot is an illness caused by long and continuous exposure to wet and cold conditions. Our feet tend to get really sweaty, even in cold environments. If you don't have socks that wick the moisture away, you're left with wet, cold feet. It's also common in temperatures of 30 to 40 degrees Fahrenheit. However, trench foot can even occur in desert climates. The key is how wet your feet get, and not necessarily how cold they are, unlike frostbite. Standing in wet socks and shoes for a long period of time tends to make it worse compared to other activities, such as swimming with water shoes. With prolonged cold and wetness, your feet can lose circulation and nerve function. They're also deprived of the oxygen and nutrients that your blood normally provides. Sometimes the loss of nerve function can make other symptoms, such as pain, less noticeable. Over time, trench foot can lead to complications if left untreated that include amputations, severe blisters, and inability to walk on affected feet, gangrene or tissue loss, permanent nerve damage, and ulcers. You may also be more prone to complications if you have any existing wounds on your feet. While recovering from trench foot, you should be on the lookout for signs of infection, such as swelling or oozing of any wounds. And now, the basic first aid for this is very similar to frostbite. Move the victim to a warm area, treat the affected area with warm water around 102 to 110 degrees Fahrenheit, no rubbing, and seek medical attention as soon as possible so the exposed areas can be treated. Lastly, we have the same issue we have with heat stress, and that is fatigue. Fatigue is the culprit to tens of thousands of injuries where there appear to be no direct cause to a topic such as heat stress or cold stress. You are all aware that when your body is fighting hard against extreme temperatures, your mind is not fully on the task at hand, not to mention the very real symptoms of sluggish, stiff movements. Fatigue is undoubtedly a tremendous threat to your safety as it pertains to cold stress. If you notice yourself drifting away from the task at hand, be sure to talk to a supervisor and get the help you need. No task is worth your life or limb. I'm Jake Wolfenden, and thanks for tuning in to focus on ways to make your work environment safer. Please remember to reach out to us if you have any questions. I look forward to seeing you in the next training.